time period? Did you see how the following week worked, or only one time? You only did it for one forecast? Okay. Who else got it to work? Zach, did you get yours to work?
So I was able to get it on the ground, but I couldn't figure out how to actually, like, when I inputted the numbers, the values that were assigned to each state, it was giving me some number, that was some, it was, scientific notation, but it was times 10 to the 22nd, so it didn't really make sense.
It was what?
It was some number times 10 to the 22nd, which didn't really make sense.
No.
And
You didn't try to, and who was in your group? Did you work with them? No.
I'm group 9 with,
Well, you know.
Sam and,
Okay, today's Wednesday. September, 26, 2018. Is this working? What do we got here? Okay, so I want the board. So we maybe want to move it over. Move it over so we see me and the board. And here, what do we got here? Okay, perfect. Okay. Let me get another marker. Okay. Okay. What we'll do today is we'll talk about, again, data, forecasting, we'll talk about database, we'll talk about storage of the cloud, and we'll also talk about blockchain. What's the big deal, and is it just hype, or is there something there? Johnny, can you do me a favor? Check in another room if there's some more black markers, and just borrow one. Politely, thank you so much. Okay, what else? What else did we cover? When's the exam?
October 10th.
October 10th. So we have an exam for October 10th. What I'd like to do is I want to go over today the homeworks that we need to make sure that everybody's prepared on, because what are we doing? We're doing agile development. We've done some homeworks where we're not complete in all our homeworks that I saw. Michael, you want to switch your name tag over so it looks good, right? You want to make sure that I'm seeing, right? I didn't go for my eye exam this week, you know?
yeah.
So I'm going to need to have my eye exam too. What else do I want to do? Let's do this. Who wants to volunteer for the computer today? Any volunteers? No? Just to be on the computer list? Claudine, you want to volunteer? Okay, so just do me a favor, just for a minute, go ahead and log in with your, probably take your phone too, because log in with Blackboard. You have your phone with you? Yeah, you probably need it. Log in with Blackboard, or if you can see that. Wow, thank you so much. Beautiful, look at that. Aren't you impressed? Shana, very nice. Good job. You hunted it down. Okay. So, and put your username and password. Hopefully it's there so it'll be masked out your password, right? We won't be able to have that. And who has a sheet of paper? Anyone have a sheet of paper? You want to take a roll today? Might as well get it ready today. Michael, you have a sheet of paper. So do me a favor, Michael. Let's do a sheet of paper here, and we'll do then, put the BTE 210, the time, the date on the top, and then make the title first, last. And what I want to do is, then we'll do email. Then we'll do, instead of email, we'll do phone. And then we'll also do forecast. And put forecast, and then we'll have yes and no. And we'll have then here, if we have the forecast. And pass that around and put yourself as number 1. Okay, and in this case, let's go to courses that you're an instructor in, right? Well, even before courses you're an instructor in, right? Let's start with that. Okay. Did you go in?
Yeah.
Oh, and then go to course documents and find your group. Okay, and then go to, you did the, I checked your work already, you did the blockchain questions, and then go to Excel forecast. So, can you go back a bit? Just go back. Yeah, back, yeah, on page before. Okay, make a note here, these should be your folders that you should have, right? So you should have what? You should have blockchain questions, you should have the Excel forecast, you should have screencasting and web conferencing, and now go into Excel forecast, right? Okay, so now let's do, so you're in the beginning, right? So do you have your spreadsheet? Open up your spreadsheet. It's busy, so we'll see if something happens, right? Everything's busy, right? It's real slow, right? We may be for the first time getting into Excel. Have we tried Excel over there before? It should have been, huh?
I think we did.
Yeah, we should have had that, right? We should have had the, portion of it. And what happened? It's still, it's loading. Okay. So the day of the exam, you should have all your, I'll do a final check of all your homework to make sure it's all complete, because in this case, you can have it as perfect as possible. Okay, very good. So let's go over, Claudine, you're on a roll. First of all, you volunteered so nicely, right? Did everybody see that? How she volunteered, right? Very, very cooperative, right? Collaborative. And now we have it. So what do you understand of what you see? If you had to explain it to somebody, what would you say? You see?
I left the data for the Google stuff. formula.
Mhm.
And then the forecast, I used the formulas and the accept. And I got the rounding error by doing my forecast minus what the actual forecast is, and that's the data I got a week later to compare.
Okay, so what did you find in terms of your forecast? Maybe try to, what did you find in
Well,
terms of your forecast?
I don't know if this is right, but it showed
What?
a full revenue or loss. No, that's a loss.
Right.
Yeah, $4 loss.
Okay,
That
so
was
what
it.
does that mean, a $4 loss? Remember what my question always, when I ask a question, what's my second part of my question always? Who cares? Right, so what does this mean?
Well, the model wasn't accurate, so
It was under
for
or
some reason,
over?
It was under.
It was under, the underestimated, and what kind of, and let's look at the formula, where's the formula for the forecast?
It's
Hi,
on the
look.
same screen.
What?
Oh, you mean like these?
No, the forecast.
This
That's,
is,
what was in green right there? What's in green right there?
wasn't that the date?
Okay, that's the date, okay, and so where's your forecast?
This part, I don't know if you read it.
Okay, so let me just see here. So let's see here, so we got my intercept, my forecast, this is what, highlight that 87,000, okay? So what is that 87,000? It's what? What is
That
it?
was the coefficient times the date.
Okay, the coefficient times the date, okay, and then you got the rounding error, and what's this forecast to? What is this one?
That one I used the data of everything building up to the day where I was doing the forecast.
Right,
And then it gave me some value, and then I took actual,
the actual, okay?
which is, I just took that from B33, so that's what it was on the day, and then it gave me a difference.
Okay. All right, very good. So now, what do you think is missing? Besides that it wasn't accurate? How many times did you do that forecast?
I only did it once.
You only did it once, right? So you only did it once, and what's the problem with that? Of only doing it once?
I wouldn't know how to make it more accurate.
Right, what else is the problem with doing it once? John, what's the problem with doing the forecast once? Remember, I haven't called on you in so long. Remember, you were disappointed the other week. You told me, you know what he said? He said, Dr. Rush, you didn't even call on me. You know, I'm so upset, you know? So I don't want to upset anyone. Anyone that wants to be called on, let me know. Okay, yeah.
I mean, like having a few trim lines, it's just that.
You have to do it more than once, right? You have to do it iterative. You want, and basically, you don't want to go in every time, every day and download the data, right? You don't want every day to do manually to do the forecast. What do you want? You want
to be automatic.
You want it to be automatic, but once you know the rules, once you know the steps, you can program it. Everybody listening to me? You can program it that you have the computer then doing the rule, automating it each time. And then what's machine learning? Evan, what's machine learning gonna help?
Artificial intelligence, you know.
What?
Like artificial intelligence?
Yeah, but what would machine learning help you in this point?
Well, it does it automatically for you, you can forecast it automatically for you.
And so it forecasts automatically, and here it would forecast it wrong for me automatically every time. So what would you want to do? I'll lose money faster, right? I can lose money on my own slowly. Here I'm going to lose money quickly. So what's it going to do, Evan?
It's gonna learn and make
And
money.
try to correct itself, right? And if it's always underestimating, then what do we want it to do? We want to maybe get closer and try to get different models or try to get different companies that it's more accurate. Can it go through many companies? Yes. Can you go through many companies? It's going to take you a long time. It can then pick out, for instance, you give it an instrument list of, let's say, those 10 companies you want, or even 1,000 companies. It can go through each time and do this each time and automate it. Okay. All right. Very good. So let's switch. Let's see if we can see my computer. Let's see, huh? Okay, so very good talking. Excellent. Thank you very much, and then I'll let
You want
you
me
know.
to sign up?
Yeah, you can, or keep it for a while and then we'll see. Okay, at the end of the class, we'll sign up so nobody can use your password, okay? So we can do this. All right, so let me log on to Blackboard, and I'll log on to Blackboard, and I'll log on, and everybody take notes, okay? So a couple of things, we're gonna do housekeeping. What is the housekeeping? We're gonna have an exam on October 10th. It'll be in this classroom. And it will start at 5 o'clock. It'll be 2 parts. It will cover the readings, and it also will cover material we cover in class. Next week, I'll go into more detail and start reviewing, okay? And then, and basically, we'll go over some more material. So let me just do a couple of things here. I'm gonna go to our regular session, which is BTE 210. I'm gonna go to course documents. Everybody with me, where I am? And you may wanna look at it yourself. Go to the regular section, and I have a section called XLSX. And I'm going to then open that. And we did this a little bit, Matt, together, right? The last time we looked at, see what the problem, okay. So, let's put this in, review. I'm gonna make this a little bit larger so we can see this. So, let me just see, move this up a bit. Let's even start here. What is this? Column A represents what? Shauna, what does column A represent?
Date.
The date, right? And column B then represents what? The open of what? Okay, take your hand away so we can hear, the open of the price, and what does that mean, open of the price? What? What does that mean? What happens? Physically, what does it mean? Let's get all our name tags. Andres, what does that mean? What?
It's
The opening market.
The opening market, right? The market opens, right? And there's a price bid, right? And how often does it change? It can change what? Tick by tick. It can be less than a second, and it keeps on changing. What are we taking? What kind of data are we taking? Are we taking tick by tick, or second by second, or every 5 minutes? How are we doing it?
day by day.
We're just doing it daily. But what they call something called HFT. What does HFT mean?
High frequency trade.
High frequency trading. Very good, Michael. High frequency trading means they're basically trading on a high frequency, meaning that the time frame is very small. What can the computer do well is it can do things very, very quickly. Even as we blink our eye, the computer can do a number of transactions as we blink our eye. We can't even do it physically that fast. So what happens is around the world, there's what they use is what they call algorithms. And what are algorithms? A set of rules that are programmed for the computer to do certain tasks. So basically, as we said before, you remember when one moving average crosses on the other, what do we say? Either we can short, or we can long, we can enter the trade, or we can sell the trade. Everybody remember that? So in this case, what we're doing is we're just going to do daily just to be able to see it. And what we have here is we have the open, we have the high and the low. We got our data through what? We can get it many places. We can get it from data feeds, where we can get the data feeds on tick by tick in minutes, where we have the open, we have the high, and we have the close. And what we ended up doing when we looked at the stock market, we just did built-in functions in Excel. And what were the two built-in functions we used? We used two, what we called regression. And what kind? We used a linear regression. And what does linear mean, Evan? That it's a straight line, right? Or we use what we call a polynomial, which is going to be curved. And what usually seems to be more accurate in the stock markets is stock prices. Do they go in a linear fashion, do you think, Vanessa?
No.
No, it's not going to be just straight up. It's going to be like curvy, right? But sometimes it's going to be going low. It can have a trend that it's going up, but we can have it. So in this case, we had two functions. We had one r squared, which was, in this case, it was 0.66. And put this in your notes, because we may have questions on the exam here. In terms of the error rate of prediction, an r squared, what are the values of an r squared? Who can tell me? Raise your hand. What are the values of r squared? If the test were today, we would be happy.
0 to 1.
0 to 1. So r squared ranges from 0 to 1, just like 0 to 100%. And usually, think about the grade you would want in the next exam.
100.
100%, you will want to have more towards the 100 than towards the 0. And basically, sometimes we have one that says 66 and the other says an r squared, which the formula looks much more complicated. It has, in terms of that, 82.9. So it looks like the equation on the top is higher and less errors. Now, sometimes there's problems. So here is an r squared of 0.82. Here's an r squared of 0.66. I put this on my course documents right under XLS that you can have then that document as well. And when we forecasted here, basically what we did is now what we want to do is it's telling me what's happening, and if I look in the back end or if I look backwards in time, that is called, and put in your notes, that is called back testing. That is called back testing. We're back testing in time and seeing if we use this type of algorithm, how would I make money or would I lose money? That is called going backwards in time. So at least I know how well my model did in the backwards. But am I always looking in my back view mirror? Is that what I want? What do you really want to do? I know how I did before, but what about tomorrow? What about next week? So that is basically what we want to do, is that's called a forecast. So back testing is looking back in time. You can put in your notes. Forecasting is what then, Jackie?
Looking forward in time.
Great. Going forward in time. And what we want to see is, do you think all these models are 100% accurate? What do you think, Matt? Of course not. If they were, then we all wouldn't be here. We'd be sitting on the beach or on a yacht somewhere and just relaxing, and I'd say, hey, you know, my models are working 24/7. I'd invite you over from your yacht to my yacht, little happy hour. You can just move in and we can do that. And then I could lecture you on my yacht.
Music for
Wouldn't that be fun?
happy
We
hour.
could broadcast from my yacht. Wouldn't that be fun? Okay, so once we would broadcast from my yacht, right, we could do our trading and we could even then broadcast our trades there. Once I have my forecast, then what's important is to do a forecast. So what I asked you to do is if you have the spreadsheet here, is I have the spreadsheet where I've tried to do some of the spreadsheet, but look at this one right here. And if you look at this spreadsheet right here, what is this? Protected? Oh, it's cancel. Okay, enable editing. Okay, if we look at look at my forecast, it then ends up having, in Excel, they have functions, and if you look at the Excel function, there's a forecast for linear. And if you bring this down, you see this right here? Those of you that don't have as much experience, if I then do, for instance, and look for forecast, let me just select here, not most recently used, but let's go to, in this case, it'd be statistical, right? So if I looked under forecast here, right? If I have a number of forecasts, I can have a number of forecasts where I give it my X, I give it my known Y's and my known X here, and X calculates or predicts a future value along a linear trend by using existing values. X is the data point for which you want to predict a value and must be a numeric value. Do we have numeric? Yes, we're going to have numeric, and in this case, what I did at this point is then I had then, for instance, A, in this case, A29 was, I'm forecasting then this date because it would be in the future. And I got 229, but I knew that once I would be doing this information, I would know the actual, since I had the actual already, and it was 222. So in this case, I had an error. It did over what it was supposed to be. The forecast where actually it did 225. So the actual loss then, if I could look at it in terms of the revenues, I could compute my regular loss. So what I want you to do for next time we meet, put this in your notes, is I want you to complete this with your forecast and work with your group. And if your group has problems, then guess what? You can go to other groups and get help. And then when a bunch of groups have problems, then what? I'm in everybody's group, I'll help you. But I want each person to take a step, at least this one separate or one separate symbol, because I want each of you to do it, not just one person in your group. But you can help each other. And then what do we want? This was up to September 28th. What's today's date, Dan?
26.
26. So what I'd like you to do is to do a new forecast and make it in another sheet for the other week and do the same thing and leave off a couple of days so you know what the actual one is and make a comparison. And then even try it for a number of different time periods. So try 3 different time periods and see how well the forecast works. And then do, what'd be nice then is to have another sheet. Have another sheet that will show how well your forecast works. More than Claudine than one time. So you can see if there's a pattern. And the pattern may be that this is not a good stock. The pattern may be this may not be a good forecast. Or there may be modifications. And that's how they work step by step. Everybody with me? So what do I want you to do then for next time, Claudine?
Do another forecast for the stocks and then compare.
Right, compare and even do like 3 times because you have a lot of dates you can take, right? You can even take some from the past, right? But you want to have some that you know what the values are that you can compare the forecast to the actual. And what you want to do is basically, what's the whole idea? Andres, the whole idea is that the computer can say, what should I do tomorrow? It's easy for all those charlatans to see. You see when the stock market was so low, I would have bought here, and then it went up to here, I would have sold there. Well, big deal. I can say that you can figure that out too when you see a chart, right? The whole idea is, what am I going to do tomorrow? What am I going to do next week? That's the whole idea. And if somebody says, I don't know, we all don't know, but what do we want to do? So we want to reduce our errors so we can be more profitable than less. that our wins can be greater than what? Our losses. That's the whole idea. And now, more and more with these machines, there's new jobs. Anybody hear of Brexit? What did you know about it? Who can tell me? What's Brexit? Nobody knows Brexit? Yes. What? It exited the EU, and what's the big deal there? Who cares? Yes, who cares?
UK was part of the EU.
UK was in part with the European
So-
Union, and what?
So now, like, people from the European Union are gonna be like, damaged by it. So they're trying to like figure out what to do with it and how to like try to get mutual benefits. And
How to get mutual, yes.
Complicates like trade between.
Complicates cake, because if we're all in a union together, right, we all have we have, basically, we can pool our resources. If you're not gonna, it's like a family, right? If you say you're exiting the family, it's gonna be more costly. It's just like, if we have a divorce in our family, right, it ends up to be parent and the two parents have more costs, because what do they have to do? They have to have two households, right? We have to supporting, we have to duplicate individual, we can't do our resources. So what is this area? Now what are they trying to do? They're trying to negotiate. So there was the CEO of IBM is trying to get into what? Artificial intelligence. And what was the problem with Brexit is the financial community and the more educated community, which way did they vote? Did they want to exit the EU? No. It was more the uneducated, because they felt more threatened. They said, this globalization, this automation isn't helping me. I'm having immigrants now come in from Eastern Europe, let's say, and from Africa and from other areas that are going to take those unskilled jobs. They're going to be basically, they're going to take it for less. So what are people afraid of? They say, what do I need this artificial intelligence? They're going to take away the mid-level jobs. And so what the IBM CEO was telling her, she goes, I like it that you have a framework, but now we have to educate people for the jobs to do what? To basically work with AI. Because AI isn't going to go away. Automation, you think that automation is going to go away? I don't care what you say about any type of country, tariffs, non-tariffs. You think we're not going to get more sophisticated? You don't think China's going to get sophisticated now in AI? Now they're developing AI chips. You know who's developing it? China as well. So that area of automation, we have to redesign what we're doing. If you're in marketing, who's my marketing people here, right? Marketing is changing completely, right? Nobody's just sending out a postcard to somebody. It's what? Is we're using big data and we're basically trying to target. So it's the same thing. Trading, all my finance people, it's what they call fintech now. It's basically using technology to do those repetitive actions and having the computer then try to do machine learning, what they call deep learning, to improve. But then we have to have people in the background doing what? It's not going to appear by itself. It has to work together to learn those rules. So what I'm telling you is here, what all this is that we first have to know what the steps are and then get the computer programmed to basically do those rules and make those corrections and take away some of those biases. Because people are saying, then what is anybody going to do? Everybody's going to be on the yacht, and our yacht's going to be crowded. Right? We can't just take everybody onto our yachts, right? So it's going to get crowded. So what we have to do is find then ways in which we can improve. So this is what I want then for next week, and I'll look at you so that by the time of the exam, everyone will have a perfect one, and then have an area in which you describe. You can even put that when you upload your new sheet. You describe, what are you finding? These are the errors that I found, and you can even just like summarize it right there, what you're finding, what's the areas. And then we'll go to, after the exam, I'll show you how to program. And how will I show you how to program? They're wizards that you write your rules in English, and it will transform it to code. But you need to we got to figure out what's the rule going to be. And then you get a deeper understanding of what do they talk about of rule-based systems. rule-based systems for healthcare, it's gonna be rule-based for finance, it's gonna be rule-based for marketing. How are they able to then do that micro-segmentation? They're doing it with rules as well. And then I'll choose a group on Monday, the best group then, of being able, or some of the groups to showcase their work of what we found out. And then we'll move to the next step of trying to write some rules. Everybody with me? We got it? So go back, you can use mine as, you can make it prettier. I just threw it up there so that you can make it prettier. You want to put also your name on your spreadsheet that you know, you can even put it as part of your top, on the top there. And then you can have here on the date, you can have a number of sheets together, and then you can even have a sheet that's a results sheet. You know, where you're taking all of those together and putting it together as a summary page. Questions? How are we doing, Michael? Okay? Thumbs up? Good. All right, now that I'm not upside down, now that you're facing on the right side, I know that I'm okay. Okay, so this was the first part. I also asked you in terms of blockchain, right? That if you go to the areas of blockchain, let me just go to the course documents here. We have the PowerPoint, and we had the hardware, the software. We talked about the security and the data. Let me just see here in terms of the data. What else we need to know about the data? And I also gave you one on the cloud, right? I gave you on the cloud. So we talked about data and, let me enable this. We talked about the idea of data and knowledge base. So last time, AJ, you remember we talked about the difference between data files and database management systems? What was the difference?
File systems are not as good as database.
Not as good, but what are they? Let's not even use the word. I wouldn't even start saying good or bad, but let's describe it. So what's a data file system versus, that's a good test question right there, right? We're reviewing, huh, AJ?
Yeah.
So we're not going to use good or bad, right? Because something, it's just like anything of a tool, right? It doesn't necessarily, maybe just all I need is a data file, right? I don't need a whole database management system. So we were talking about data files versus database management systems, DBMS, and what was the difference? The files are what? Independent. Data is stored. In separate.
They have like a query.
Separate files, right? Is the data redundant?
Yeah. It's not up to date.
Right, it may not be up to date, right? It's independent separately. Database management systems, we're talking about what? A centralized data storage. This data can reside on premises or on the cloud. And the cloud means what? All the cloud means are just computers off premises, and how do you get to them? Via a browser, right? Via the internet. And we talked about the idea of data redundancy, right? Data isolation, right? These data files have data isolation. The data files have data consistency. So these, if I ask you what were the main problems of a data file system, AJ, you would say data redundancy. You would say what else? Data isolation and data inconsistency. You remember, AJ, if you change your address, it may not be changed throughout all the files in an organization. And think about where your data is, and think about your customer, right? If you were the customer of an organization too, your data could be in many different places. But even just as an employee, even just as a student, it can be. So these data redundancy, data isolation, and data inconsistency, if I asked you then, what does a database management system solve? What does it solve? How does it give you less data redundancy because it's stored? But what's the disadvantage is that it's stored all in one place? Yes, Greg.
Well, if someone hacks, it's all you.
Right, I'm vulnerable. If somebody hacks me, if what? If my machine goes down, if my hard drive, if the electricity fails, power, anybody ever have a power problem, right? All over the world, right? Power problems. All of this is that I have to solve for it for that. So it will solve this. And then what are other things that I want to maximize then is that I can have data integrity, that I can rely on the data being correct. I need to maximize my data independence. I don't have to be dependent on each individual department. And what's going to be important is that I have data security. Because now you know, even the governments, even the credit cards, everywhere I'm worried about being hacked, being compromised, being my data is aware of it. We talked about the data hierarchy, and we talked about relational database model. What's the key in a relational database model? What can you say? They're tables that are connected. A relational database management system are tables that are connected to one another. And what are they connected by? They're either connected by a primary key or what we call a foreign secondary key. We talked about that. We showed an example. We talked about big data and what is defining big data, the characteristics, managing big data. And in the stock market, if I'm dealing with high frequency trading, do you think that's big data? Of course, right? If I'm not even talking about the daily, which I'm under, but thinking about in an hour, I'm not even going to have in an hour, there's, 60 minutes, and each minute has 60 seconds, and then I'm going to break it down to each second may have a number of trades to it. So I'm going to have then that big data where it's difficult to find that I have two descriptions then. We talked about the descriptions of my big data, but what it is now is that I can get now what we call IoT. What's IoT? Internet of Things. Basically all devices that can gain data. I can get sensors, right? And based on that data, I can capture that data to be able to do, for instance, remotely do a watering of my systems when it's too dry, when it's too wet. I can do it. I can have social data. I can have Twitter. I can have, we talked about it, it's sentiment analysis. That basically what I'm going to do is based on the sentiment. Do people like certain things? What's the trending? Anybody been on Twitter before? We have the trending of what's the sentiment of certain people in certain ways. I'm being followed all the time. So I'm able to do it. I have to understand data governance. What's data governance? Dan, what's data governance? You have any clue?
Is it how you structure who can access the data?
Yeah, somebody has to own the data first, right? Think about your healthcare record. What is that? What is in terms of your healthcare record? What's data governance? It's who can see your data health record. Who do you want? Do you want everybody to see your healthcare record, Dan?
Probably not.
Probably not. Who do you want them? Who do you want to see it?
doctors.
Your
like
doctors that
parents,
you're interested in, right? Who else?
Parents,
Basically, who you give permission to among your family, who else?
hospital,
The hospital, if you give permission, who else?
um,
Maybe if you go for any diagnostic tests, right? You go to radiology, if you go for a blood test, right, they're supposed to be able to see it. So data governance is what gets put into the system and who's able to see it, who's able to change it, who's able to make changes to it. And how do you manage it becomes a question. Managing my data, remember I talked about database management systems, and I said database management systems use a query language called what? What's the query language of a database management system? Conchetta. S who, Vanessa? S who? QL. L stands for what? Language. Q stands for query, and S stands for structure. What's structured data? Structured data is that I can define easily the fields of my data. And in an Excel spreadsheet, usually, what are the fields? Columns or rows? Columns or rows? What are the fields?
Columns.
Columns. And my rows are called what?
Records.
Records, right? So I can then structure, for instance, then, whereas all students with test scores greater than 90, right, give them an A. Or give them keys to the Mercedes. And I have to get a lot of Mercedes right in the parking lot, right? So these are structured that I know in advance what are my fields in advance. Now we have something else, and this is traditional relationship data versus what they call no SQL, and this many times is being used for big data, for video, for unstructured data. That I want the machine to try to figure out fields. Anybody see face recognition? Right? We use it, and there's a lot of algorithm, right? And we can even tag, right? In Facebook, we can tag our pictures, right? But basically now it's doing facial recognition. For biometrics, now they're even doing facial recognition. There's a company here, I'll invite them. In Miami, they do for marketing, they do facial recognition. They can tell how old you are when you pass by, kind of like a sign, a digital sign. And they're advertising, they can tell what if you're female, if you're male, if a certain age you are, and then they can tell, do you seem to be happy, do you seem to be sad, based on your facial expressions, right? So they're doing all this. You think this is structured? No, it's non-structured. How am I going to get it? You make a face like this, right? That you're repulsed, or this, you know, different faces that they'll recognize many times. That they'll do it. In terms, they'll do it also in voice recognition. Now that I have I feel like I almost have to. You didn't remind me. The thing that reminded me, I need to mic myself. I knew I was screaming too much, right? You didn't even tell me. So Dan and Evan, can you be so kind to remind me to put on my mics every time?
okay.
Thank you. My AV section of it. Okay, so now I'm micing myself. So, unstructured is that. Open source solution. What do we mean by open source? Evan, what's open source?
Anyone can access it, anyone can use it, anyone can utilize it, pretty much.
It means, write this in your notes. Open source means anyone can view the computer code. many cases, open source means that it can be changed. The closest I can come to it, everybody's been to Wikipedia, where people can edit and then other people edit what other people do. That's almost, you can think about it as an open source in let's say in English or in any other languages, right? Is a Wikipedia. Open source in computer code is that you can see it. Some computer companies, for instance, Apple has proprietary source code that they don't have it open to the public to see. Open source is. So managing big data, they're now having open source solutions, meaning that people can modify it to what they have. Okay. So big data can be used in many different areas, and then we talk about a data warehouse and a data mart. Everybody knows what a warehouse is, right? A warehouse is what? Khalid, what's a warehouse?
Data warehouse, just be like a building with all the servers, I don't know.
Okay, tell them, but it's data. So it's like a server farm, but a warehouse is what? Where a lot of equipment is stored, inventory is stored, right? That's a warehouse, right? A data warehouse is where data resides, but put this in your notes. A data warehouse is non-transactional data. Data warehouse is non-transactional data that is not live data. Data warehouse is data that will be used for further analysis. So if I go to Home Depot, right, and they're going to check, there's something on the shelf and it's not there, they're going to check what? In their inventory database to see how many they have in stock. Is that a data warehouse? No. But what they'll do is, after they see what people bought, they'll take that information of who bought what, maybe what times of the day, they'll put it into a data warehouse. A data mart is a subsection of a data warehouse, meaning that I have a hypothesis of a study that I want, so I'm only going to take part of the data warehouse. So as you said, Colette, a lot of times I'll be using hardware, but I'll also be using software to analyze the data in my data warehouse. So it's basically a storage place. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a building. Sometimes when you think about a building is, like hosting, if you went to Google, right, and you saw their Google servers, they basically have huge buildings, right, with a number of, have you seen pictures of those server farms where they'll have a number of racks and racks of computers, right, and a section of that may be, part of it may be what they call a data warehouse. But we could even do a data warehouse in the cloud somewhere that were, depending on what we had, small number, okay? But they call it a warehouse just to think about it. So here they're saying a repository of historical data. So here's the key. When I said like non-transactional, historical, that are organized by subject to support a decision maker's organization. Where Data Mart is a low-cost, scaled-down version, so for a specific version. I'd love to show this, and you know what these are good for? When somebody knows it. For somebody that doesn't know, this is meaningless, isn't it? You just see a bunch of circles here. So let me just tell you what to think about. You see like a little cylinder here? Put this in your note. That little cylinder means data. In computer terms, they try to trick you, but in computer terms, all these little cylinders, you see all these little cylinders? They represent data. easy, I'll show you, everything's easy when you know it. So basically, what they're saying, this is a data warehouse framework. A framework means basically what they're trying to look at, and they make it more complicated than it is. And this is basically what's external to go into the data warehouse. You see how this says a data warehouse? This is external. And did you see on one of the slides it says data is dirty? What does it mean data is dirty? What does dirty data mean? Kelsey, what is dirty data?
Incorrect.
Incorrect, incomplete. So a lot of times, for instance, in a data warehouse, recruiters, I work with a company that what they wanted to do was recruiters, they spend a lot of time going to different schools recruiting students for their jobs. And basically, what did they have? They had a hypothesis saying, which schools should we go recruit at? And which type of students should we recruit? Because we want them to be most successful. That it's a good fit for us, right? I don't want to, why wouldn't they want to hire somebody that's not a good fit? Yes, sir.
Because you would be paying them and they would do nothing, so you're.
Basically, I have to pay for training, right? You're miserable, I'm miserable, right? We're both miserable, right? Why waste that time? Why waste your time? Especially with the recruiters thinking about the companies, why waste their time and their resources? And they want, and also they don't want you to have a bad image of my company, right? If even if you go to another job, you know it was a pain in the butt to work for that company. Or something like Glassdoor, anybody seen it? Where people anonymously write about what it is to work in companies. Now you can't hide that. You know, it's just like a restaurant. A restaurant gets bad reviews, companies get bad reviews. You know, this company sucks to work for. So they want to keep you happy, and they also want to get it to be a good, if to get a good marriage. So based on this, I worked with the company, and what they said is they wanted to do a data warehouse to see who makes the best employees. So they ended up finding out for this company that it wasn't basically just going to the Ivy League schools that made the best employees, but it was rather they found out, and it wasn't those students that got GPAs of 4.0. They didn't make the best employees, but what they found out is those students that took these types of courses did the best. Because you know how sometimes you can have choices of which electives to take. And a lot of times people take like the easy ones that, you know, don't do it, or they can take the harder ones, and they found those that chose the more difficult, challenging courses did better, were better employees for that company. So they can do this hypothesis testing here, so you can see here that along this way, external, meaning these are my external databases that I'm going to do. This ELT means extraction, transformation, and load. It means I'm going to take my data, I'm going to extract it. This is my enterprise data, which I can have my finance data, marketing, and then I'm going to put them into individual data mart. A subdirectory, this could be my marketing database, this could be my finance database, this could be my supply chain data going into here, and then I can then do the reporting back here. So that's the whole big deal, is taking the data and then reporting it to people that make decisions and helping them find the decisions that they didn't know before. I know about my data, for instance. Anybody, can you rent a car when you're under 21?
Yes.
No.
Some places you can't. Why not?
I think it depends if like normal people cannot do it if you're like.
Normal people, and you're not normal or what? Greta?
Well, I mean, like, I know like if you're like less than 21, but you're like in the military, you can do it.
Yeah, military or something like that. Well, they found out one of the rental car companies at that time was doing also a data warehouse, data mart ID, and they said, is it true? Why don't they rent? Because they say that they're worse drivers. They'll come back with crashed cars, right? They'll be drinking, driving, you know, not good drivers. And they did a study with hypothesis testing, and they found out that it wasn't true. So they said, hey, we can have a lead here, we can give it then to people under 25 for it. And basically what they said is, but first we have to clean up our dirty data. So that's the key here. So those data warehouses then, and those data marts then are available. So then you could do it for those government or government users. Okay, and these are the data warehouses. So the key then becomes, where does this blockchain come into being? Is blockchain dealing with data? What's the difference between blockchain, write this in your notes, what's the difference between blockchain and databases? We talked about data, right? We talked about database management systems, right, Shana? We talked about those. So what is the idea of blockchain? Where will blockchain help? Right? Where will then blockchain then help? So I'm going to go to yours, okay? So if I go to the BTE, let me go back to the PC here. I go to BTE and I go to my web links. Right? One of the things that I would want for next time, you see here, the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain for business. Right? So it sees here, it's how Bitcoin and blockchain are different, and what's the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain. This was one of the questions that I asked you to look at, right? In terms of what we...
Bitcoin is a digital currency launched in 2009 with the intention of simplifying online transactions by bypassing government control of currency. It does this by storing and transacting the currency over a peer-to-peer network, a blockchain, rather than using a central monetary repository. It's important to make the distinction that Bitcoin is not a blockchain itself. Bitcoin is transacted over an open, public, anonymous blockchain network. In many ways, you can think of blockchain as the operating system, and Bitcoin is one of the many applications that run.
So the difference is, you can put this in your notes then, that blockchain is the framework. Blockchain is like the operating system. Bitcoin is an application. Just like you say Office is an application, Bitcoin can be an application running. And what they said here with the key,
think of blockchain as the operating system, and Bitcoin is one of the many applications that run on that system. The blockchain that underlies Bitcoin has some fundamental similarities, but also key differences to a blockchain built for business, such as the Linux Foundation's Hyperledger Fabric. Both are cost-effective as they increase speed of transactions and reduce overhead costs. Both are highly efficient as the transaction is recorded once and is then visible to all parties through the
Okay. The key to blockchain is that it's recorded once. It's what they call a distributed ledger. Everything along the chain has a copy of the ledger. What do we say a database management system has? How many times did we have it? We had the data once and it was stored once. In this case, this ledger is going to be stored or copied along this, and it's what we call immutable. You cannot erase it. And the whole idea of blockchain is it tries to eliminate the intermediary. It tries to eliminate the middle person. It tries to eliminate the inefficiencies that I get for like transaction fees. It tries to eliminate the time to market.
distributed network. Both are tamper evident. A transaction cannot be changed. It can only be reversed with another transaction, in which case both transactions are visible. However, a Bitcoin blockchain is limited in a few ways. It is primarily designed to transact cryptocurrency and is also open and public, meaning anyone can join and view every.
So Bitcoin is open and public, and many times it's what we call anonymous. Bitcoin in the past has been loved by whom? Drug dealers and thieves, right? All that black market, why did they love it? I didn't have to have what they called KYC. What's KYC? When you open up a bank account. Right, know your customer. KYC means know your customer. In Bitcoin, it was, I don't have to know my customer, and what it ended up to be is a lot of the thieves, and it was like anonymous. Now, and it was, everyone was on the blockchain.
Transaction that's ever happened on the network. It is anonymous, meaning it is nearly impossible to know the identity of who's involved in a transaction. Because of this, it requires heavyweight cryptography to deter fraudulent activity, which...
You see these when they're doing the ones and zeros? Remember how I talked about what was those ones and zeros in my data hierarchy? What was that? What was a 0 and a 1 called? Binary. What else was it called? It wasn't a byte, but it was what?
A bit.
A bit. Good. So those zeros and ones, and it was a combination then. Hopefully then you wear earphones when you take the test, right? So, you know.
requires significant computing power. These characteristics lead to many issues around efficiency, confidentiality, security and trust when conducting business, especially around regulated industries. On the other...
See, so in regulated industries, what the key is, all of a sudden they say, hey, I want to have security and trust, so I have to know my customer. So what's now being changed in blockchain, they say, well, how's blockchain then being done with banks? Is even blockchain is being interested in banks where they're going to have a network where they're going to know who their customers are, and it doesn't necessarily have to be anonymous.
On the other hand, a blockchain built for business enables you to exchange anything of value, whether tangible, like a car or house, intangible, like a patent or copyright, or digital, like videos or photos. It is private, so the invited members know exactly who they are doing business with. It is permissioned, so participants are only given access to data relevant to them. And it runs on smart contracts.
Put this in your notes. In blockchain now, there's something called a smart contract. Anybody know what that is? You know, Michael?
Yeah. It's like a contract that's coded to execute automatically and it's recorded in the block.
It's basically kind of like the rule basis that we were thinking about. So let's say we were going to insure in Homestead our orange grove. When do you think we would be in trouble with our oranges in our orange grove? What about temperature? What would the temperature have to be?
32 degrees.
We would be in trouble when it was less than 32 degrees. So our smart contract, we would have what? IoT sensors in the grove, and when that temperature was less than 32 degrees, for instance, we would be able to then institute our contract. Or when trucks then were coming in, I wouldn't accept then the meat if the meat went above 45 degrees. And I could set up a contract, these smart contracts, as I go along.
Business logic embedded into the network, reducing disputes and increasing trust. A blockchain for business also utilizes selective endorsement, which allows participants to control exactly who verifies transactions. All of these qualities make a blockchain for business more efficient, more secure, and more effective across your business networks. For more information on building a blockchain for business, visit ibm.com/blockchain.
So guess what?
Ready to start building a blockchain for business? Visit developer.org.
So what does IBM want to do? It wants to sell you something, right? they missed on a lot of the PCs, they went out of the PC business, right? So IBM, they did Watson Intelligence, and now they're trying to do blockchain. And we'll discuss it more, but I wanted to show you that that was just basically another way to look at data. They're now trying to envelop this blockchain. Okay, so you need to do, we're gonna go over then that cloud, which is TG3. I want everybody then to work with your group on the next homework assignment of the data, and then we'll do the next role for Monday. Stay with me if you have questions. Thank you. And get with me, girls.